Story 1. Dancer here. When I first started, I was barely a month into the job. Myself and another dancer took these two guys to VIP but in separate booths. It was at the end of the night and lights were on to signal people to go home. The guy I danced for said his friend was paying for the dances, so we walked to their booth and the friend and the dancer are extremely buzzed. The guy's lying on the couch, shirt pulled up, begging the dancer to take a whiz on him. She was buzzed enough to comply. I was very sober, and my customer, the dude's friend, watched in shock that this was actually happening. She did as he requested and the guy loved it. I was so new I just had to wait and watch as well. Dude was quite pleased and then went to the ATM to pay me and his girl. And no, she didn't get fired. If she were to get fired, it would have been for being too buzzed. So intoxicated to do such things. It was fully consensual. The club has a cleaning crew that comes in nightly. Girls are fired for offering extra services. This was one of those situations that they didn't know they had to put on the do not do list until they realized it could happen. That's if they found it. I wasn't going to say anything. What happens in the booth is their business. Customers have their quirks. That was his. We don't judge and it's none of my business. I don't know clubs offered water sports as part of their services. Story 2. This is probably pretty tame, but I haven't been to many clubs. Picture it. Rural Pennsylvania, a club on the side of a busy highway or near some truck stops. It's pirate and nautical themed. So there's blow-up palm trees, a fake tiki bar, and the whole nine. The place is basically a converted warehouse. We are hanging out there for a friend's birthday and we're kind of ready to leave, and there she is. Let's call her Alexis. She's probably in her early or mid-20s. Overall, she's a very good-looking lady. She walks up on stage and in the drunken blur, we can see she's an amputee. Left leg amputated below knee. I'm all about equal opportunity employment, so I'm like, cool, let's see her perform. Then she grabs something out of the treasure chest on stage, prop, and it's a peg leg. This poor girl turned her performance into a pirate shtick. She fully did a Captain Morgan-style pose up onto the stage. So fast forward, this crazy pirate dance is over and she's walking around for tips, so we're all tipping her, because we aren't a-holes. And she smiles at my buddy and says thank you. There's not a tooth in sight. She then proceeds to ask him if he's ever had a gummy bear before. If you don't know what that is, Google it. Welcome to rural PA. Story 3. This entitled arrogant prick decided to try and stake claim to my time. I was working and he was a patron. He explained he couldn't go to his regular spot anymore because the girls were stuck up or something like that. He never tipped me. Wouldn't buy a dance but became annoyed when I was called up on stage, even though I explained it wasn't an option for me to stay on the floor. Guy was super aggressive, constantly pawing at me and trying to make me dance for him for free, almost like he expected me to fawn over him simply for being him. It was definitely nothing special, and he gave off sleazy used car salesman vibes. The last night he came in, which was a total of 3, if I remember correctly, my manager had already pulled me aside to tell me the dude had shown up on my days off and left when they told him I wasn't there. After hearing this, I was even more creeped out. I decided to put my foot down and ignore him. I spoke to him for a few minutes, acting more cold and disinterested than usual, which got under his skin to the point where he was making rude, sarcastic remarks and trying to subtly put me in my place. A random, younger-looking group of guys walks in and sits on a table. I falsely exclaim, "Oh, there they are!" and tell him I need to go say hi to my friends. I sit down and feign being excited to see and greet them while telling them I need to get away from someone. Immediately, the creep dude is right behind me and puts his hand on my shoulder. I turn around and he says, "You're going to regret this, witch," and walks out forever. I was relieved to never see him again, until I'm reading the news at my new job several years later. I click on a news story about an arrest and the disappearance of a missing girl, and this dude's mugshot is staring back at me, the hairs on my neck raised. And as I read, I realized I had narrowly missed being another target for this messed up dude. The missing girl had also been a dancer and worked at the club he told me originally that he couldn't go back to. It wasn't because the girls were stuck up, it was because he was the last person seen with this poor girl as she left work sick after sitting and drinking with him. The really sad part is that he was released without being charged due to a lack of evidence, and the girl has still never been found. It was definitely the worst thing I ever experienced at the club. Story 4. I worked at a club in Seattle a long time ago. Our owner made friends with an Alaskan club owner and invited him down to spend a week. I was working the door when he got there. Dude showed up to our club in an 80s white stretch limo looking like a cartoon character. White cowboy hat, bolo tie, Sam Elliott mustache, the works. His 2 friends, a pair of bulky hominoids in black sports coats were no doubt his mafioso security team, followed him into the club. One of them stopped at the door and asked me to get their other suitcase out of the trunk. I look in there and see 2 things. A giant black suitcase and a brand new shovel. It still had a UPC tag on the spade. I think, that's weird. And since I was young and didn't know things, I got the suitcase and hollered at the guy, "Hey, why is there a shovel in the trunk?" God, that was dumb. Dude stops, slowly turns around, walks over, puts his giant meaty arms around me, leans in and goes, "Kid, every good Italian's got a shovel in the trunk," and walks into the club. I never spoke to them again. That was probably for the best. It's always good to be prepared. Besides, Italians love to cook and use their basil, tomatoes, and oregano. A good shovel will always come in handy. Story 5. Some buddies and I were in a seedy club in the Chinatown district of Honolulu. The usual dancer formula was to come out and do one song in a bikini, another song in one clothing less, and the last song completely bare. So this one girl goes through a routine when she's down to the last part. She lays on her back, puts her ankles behind her ears, and starts spinning herself in a circle like a, well, I don't know what else is like a dancer spinning herself in a circle on her back, but it was like that. She's encouraging the men to wad dollar bills up in little balls and try to throw them into a forbidden garden. Then suddenly she starts to bear down and flex and she starts popping ping pong balls out. But this time she's been on stage dancing for a good 10 to 15 minutes. Those ping pong balls have apparently been up there that whole time. Everyone's having a good time appreciating this girl's unique skills when she fires one out and hits this marine-looking kid square in the forehead. And I swear, for the smallest of split seconds, it stuck there before falling into his beer mug. The marine picked up his beer, chugged it down, and showed everyone the ping pong ball in his mouth. At the time, we all cheered and high-fived the guy and slapped him on the back. But looking back and thinking about it, I just gagged a little. Story 6. My friend and I went to this club, and while sitting at a table, this girl and an older lady, at least 60, came up and sat with us. After talking to them for a while, the girl told us she actually worked at the club, and the older lady with her was her mom. They later told us her mom comes and watches her and her friends work all the time. She said even her dad will sometimes come and watch. She was so casual about it too. Said both her parents had their own favorites they like to watch, but her mom gets mad at her dad. It was so awkward. Like, what do you even say? You have a very supportive family. The mom was the weirdest part. The lady looked like she went door to door selling Bibles. Story 7. When I was younger, I was at a club for my friend's birthday. Another girl our age just came and sat with us, and she really didn't seem to want to be there or around the other guys who actually had money. So I asked why she didn't just quit, and she said something akin to, "My boyfriend is a bouncer here and is forcing me to work here. Otherwise, he's going to kick me out of our apartment and I'll be homeless." I asked why she didn't get a different job, and she said something like, "Because he knows there's nowhere else he can work and make as much money." Boyfriend sounded like he was just using her. It was super sad. The dude was also in his late 30s. She was more than a decade younger, just out of high school. The older I get, the more messed up it is for me. That is kind of messed up and absolutely illegal. Story 8. The story was that a girl who worked there set a guy up to get robbed. He found out, hit her in the head with a beer bucket, and a fight ensued among several patrons. I assume most of them didn't know the reason she was hit and just fought the guy. One of those people was a regular. As the almost robbed guy left the club, the regular threw a beer bottle at his head. Almost robbed guy steps out of his car, walks up, pulls out a gun, and drops him in front of the club's entrance or exit. He returned to his car and wasn't found by police for several months. Story 9. I went to the local ratty club with some buddies. I didn't really want to be there, but it was somewhere to party after the bars closed. I got to talking to a woman in her 40s in a nurse's outfit. She told me she was wearing it because her daughter is going to nursing school and she's working there to pay for it. She then tells me she's paying for it to get closer to her daughter since she just got out of prison for putting a hit on her husband. The guy the hitman went after attacked the wrong person, got arrested, and snitched on her. I was too sober to be dealing with all that. Story 10. I went with a friend one time for just a normal evening. Halfway through the evening, his expression went from being a guy in a club to like he had just seen something horrible, to find out his mom was actually up on the stage. He never knew what she did at night because he lived with his dad. Well, that's going to leave quite a deep mental scar for life in this dude's friend. I wonder what the friend and his mom will talk about the next time they see each other. If you're as curious as I am, give the like button and smash and subscribe to my channel. You might get an update in that story. Story 11. Me and some buddies were in Montreal like any group of buzzed young men in that city. We found ourselves at a club. Pretty standard stuff for a bit, but then they pulled some guy who was having a bachelor party on stage to have two girls humiliate him for a bit before giving him a dance. It was kind of funny at first. They were whipping him and all that jazz. They made him sit down to his boxers, and for some reason, they were absolutely shredded. It looked like he took his underpants, put them halfway through a paper shredder, and then decided to wear them out. The announcer guys just said, "What the hell, did this guy just leave a banshee attack?" In his classic club announcer guy voice. The poor bachelor was just filled with shame and regret on the stage. Story 12. A bouncer I knew, a huge guy but the nicest dude, went outside to stop an argument. Shot in the chest, passed away in the parking lot. Some history, this was in Dallas, Texas, 25 plus years ago, when Dallas had the most clubs per capita in the US. The club in the post had been one of the nicer ones, until ones from Vegas moved in. The Penthouse Club, Spearmint Rhino. The place got a lot rougher. Physical fights, which used to be a very rare thing, were happening almost nightly. Some of the dancers had boyfriends that would come in and hassle the guys tipping. One-night words were flying, then fists. The guys were shoved outside. More words. Bouncers stayed outside to keep these guys apart. One goes to his car. The boyfriend. I was told that the memorial service got his weapon from the car and unloaded it. Story 13. I worked for a beverage company in my early 20s. We delivered pop and bar mix to nightclubs, peelers, and restaurants. I met a lot of dancers. A lot of them were smart college girls who made great money when they weren't in class or doing homework. There was the opposite side of that coin, and some were doing it to support their habits. One of the poorer establishments in the far reaches of the area catered to a lower crowd. There was a problem with one of the juice guns, so I was working behind the bar for a bit. The place had a very small corner stage, and a woman wearing clothes that didn't fit got up on the stage. She was clearly hammered, had a black eye, and was covered in bruises. The pole was her support while she was standing, dancing, and she tried to swing around on it with one hand. Her grip slipped and she fell off the stage and face planted on the floor. The staff, the patrons, everyone saw it, and no one did anything for what seemed like forever. The bar was on the opposite side of the room, and I had to tell a waitress to do something. They picked her up and took her into the back. It was completely bizarre. I'll never forget it. Story 14. I used to be a regular at a club. The young lady had some sort of medical issue. They said it was a heart issue, but probably too much snow. An ambulance was called and hauled her off. She came back to work like 3 hours later. Second, I was hanging out with my buddy at the club for any number of hours when the bouncer came over and kicked him out because he had no shoes on. I never noticed, and I was like, what the hell are you in here with no shoes for? He said he wanted to see how long it would take for him to get kicked out. This dude's buddy's a legend. I wouldn't go as far as he did, but I always love a game of how long till. Story 15. Technically not at the club, but my friend group included a girl who was a dancer at a local place. She had side work she also did and would often ask us to wait around in a different room for her safety. Like if John got a bit too aggressive or thought he could do whatever he wanted because he's paying, she'd yell and one or two of us would rush in and let him know that thing wasn't going to fly. It wasn't a pet model situation because she wasn't giving us the money or anything. She did it strictly on her own and we were just there to protect our friend. One of the only times she didn't have one of us in the friend group was with a dude she trusted. Dude was crazy jealous and had been basically waiting for the one time she didn't have one of us with her and he charged her. I still kind of blame myself for it. I think we all do. She made her choice of career and how she wanted to make money and she knew it was dangerous, but it was her life and I'm not going to judge her for it because she was a genuinely wonderful person and I miss her a lot. It probably would have happened eventually because none of us knew this dude was crazy, but even then she was still my friend and didn't deserve that. I'm sorry, Sam. I miss you and love you. Those days causing a ruckus around town and just everyone being dumped together really were some of my favorite days. Story 16. My father has been to a club only once in his life, and he has recanted it to me a number of times now. Some of his work colleagues decided to all go to the local bar. The one coworker who suggested the whole outing seemed overly enthusiastic about the trip. They all sit down at a table near the bar, and a cute young waitress comes over to serve them. The enthusiastic coworker gets a big smile on his face, puts $1 in her exposed lingerie, and gives her a small slap on the bum as she's walking away. Everyone looked at him a bit bewildered and asked if he knew her, to which he replied, "Yeah, of course, that's my daughter." Needless to say, my father has never felt the urge to go to a strip club ever again. Story 17. A close black friend of mine took me, Hispanic male, to an underground club in the middle of Baltimore. It was basically an unmarked abandoned warehouse. We had to pay the cover fee, $20, to an ice cream truck parked outside. We went through 3 metal detectors and 2 pat-downs before we got in. There was one light-skinned thick chick who was beautiful. She came to dance at my table and I realized her bumhole was pierced. I was completely blown away and mesmerized by it. I couldn't stop thinking about the dedication it took to do that. She must not have eaten for like 3 weeks to let that thing heal properly. I didn't even know that was a piercing you could do. It messed me up for like 3 weeks. I can get her out of my head. The dedication. Story 18. My first time ever in a club. We walk in and there's a large stage in the center of the room with 2 girls dancing, with people sitting around taking in the scenery, etc. Not even within 5 minutes of sitting down at a table, around 10 feet from the stage, one of the dancers comes off the pole to take a tip from this glass-wearing dude's outstretched arm. After taking the tip, she took his glasses off and, I kid you not, stuck one of the temples up her bum and proceeded to walk across the stage with this dude's glasses hanging out, just bouncing to the beat. I don't know how crazy that is in the grand scheme of club shenanigans, but it sure opened my eyes wide and made me a little bit scared for my glasses should I happen to get too close to the stage. I bet every time that dude uses his glasses, he gets pink eye. Dang. Story 19. This happened a lot during my 20s. My late dad, a blackout drinker, would give away hundreds of dollars to dancers who pretended they'd be his girlfriend but would ghost him afterward. My mom passed away when I was a teen and the man was desperate for female affection. For some idiotic reason, he'd keep going back to the same seedy joints and engaging with these ladies, who were more than happy to take his money and knock him around. It would have been okay if he could afford to do this, but he couldn't. He was unemployed. But giving away large amounts of money to people exploiting him had put him in debt where he couldn't buy necessities like food or heat in his apartment. It got so bad. He started collecting sentimental things from my childhood house and going to pawn shops so he'd have a few extra dollars. There's too many times where I'd have to drive to these clubs, march inside, and drag my dad out despite him fighting me over it. It was like something out of Shameless, except a lot less funny. Story 20. As a former dancer, there isn't a lot I haven't seen. One customer wanted a VIP room with me because I was the most heavily tattooed girl in the place that night. He wanted me to walk on his face with my stilettos on. I refused, worried about liability, crazy wife, etc. He threw an absolute fit and it was a whole scene. There are a lot of fights. So many. Between girls, customers, girls and customers, girls and staff, customers and bouncers. I saw a guy get curb stomped once. That will haunt me forever. One time I went up to the stage to let another dancer know her tampon string was hanging out, way out, and she legit did not care. She just kept going. Even my husband hasn't heard all of the depraved stories I have about customers being absolute horror shows, to me directly and to other girls. Some of it I've had years of therapy dealing with. Some of it has messed up intimacy for me probably for life, and some of it has given me serious issues, marriage and trusting men. Customers are terrifying. One girl I knew from another club was kidnapped and attacked by an obsessed regular. Another girl was point blank during a day shift by a wife who walked in looking for her husband. I did it for 4 years, and I think it was the worst thing I ever did to myself psychologically. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you made it this far, I'm sure you'll also enjoy bar staff. Have you ever had a man use the safe word drink escape? Story 4 was wild initially, then will leave a smile on your faces. See you in that video.